Next week's council will be the final council presided over by the Greek presidency. Next month, Italy will assume the presidency role. As with all end-of-term councils, the agenda is quite long. This reflects the custom that at the end of each rotating presidency, to take stock of developments over the previous 6 months, there are a whole series of issues on the agenda. The bulk of the items for discussion are progress reports outlining the state of play and dossiers discussed since January last, or conclusions drafted by the Presidency for approval by Council on these dossiers. I'm happy to go through the agenda point by point, but I should say that many of the issues on next week's agenda are still being discussed in the preparatory body for that Council. It's called the SCA, or the Special Committee on Agriculture, and it's meeting as we speak in Brussels, clearing up technical issues and reaching agreement on the less political points. This means that the final agenda for next week's meeting may change in the light of developments in Brussels today, and we might bear that in mind as we go through the issues. First of all, the future of milk policy. From Ireland's point of view, the key issue for discussion is item 8, the report from the Commission on the development of the market situation in the dairy sector. Under the terms of the milk package, this was a set of accompanying measures agreed back in 2011 to complement the exit from milk quotas that's planned for next year. The Commission is obliged to submit a report to the Council by the end of June on the milk market situation and the functioning of the milk package. This report will only be released today, so I'm unable to brief you on it, but the key focus of discussion is likely to be on the Presidency's proposed Council conclusions on the future of the dairy sector. A draft of these conclusions was discussed this morning at the SCA, but the outcome was inconclusive. So we'll have to wait and see what happens before the Council. The situation in the dairy sector has been discussed at every Council under the Greek presidency. It's no surprise to hear that Ireland has been very vocal during these debates. The position is that the Council is divided on the steps that should be taken in the run-up to and after the abolition of dairy quotas. Ireland is among a growing number of member states that are arguing that the soft landing envisaged for the expiry of quotas is not happening in all member states. It's certainly not happening here. We have lobbied for measures to be taken to address this, notably through an adjustment to the butterfat correction coefficient. Our allies on this include Denmark, Netherlands, Germany, Austria, Poland, Luxembourg, Estonia, Belgium and Latvia. However, another large group of member states, including France, Spain, UK, Sweden and Italy, are opposed to taking any action at all. Some are linking the issue to the policy direction to be taken after quotas expire, in particular France. And there are subtle hints that some, at least, would like to see the reintroduction of some form of supply control in the case of a crisis in the sector. Needless to say, I will be arguing strongly at next week's Council for immediate action to address the short-term issue of the soft landing, and I will be unequivocal in my opposition to reintroducing any form of supply control after quotas go in April next year. I favour intensive monitoring of market prices and the rapid deployment of existing instruments if a crisis should occur, like intervention prices, for example, and aids to private storage and so on. To run briefly through some of the other points, but just on the milk package, because this is the most important issue for us next week. The key issue here is that countries that were never overly keen on abolishing milk quotas are now trying to use the butterfat correction coefficient to try and negotiate market controls post-quota abolition should the price fall. In other words, they would like countries like Ireland, who are planning to grow output, to essentially be curtailed from that growth should the price fall. And we will vehemently oppose that. We have been preparing now for 4 years for quota abolition. Our farmers are continuing to invest and have invested heavily to do this. Our processing sector has spent the guts of €500 million in preparation for that. And most of the markets that we are planning to grow into with the increased volume that we're going to produce are actually outside of the European Union altogether. In places like China, Middle East, Russia, North Africa, and so on. And even though we are planning for rapid growth, the overall percentage that will contribute to Europe's milk pool is relatively small. So we will have price volatility in the dairy sector. Whether Ireland produces more milk or not, that price volatility is going to be part of the market. But certainly we won't tolerate a situation where Ireland will be penalised because we're the fastest growing producer of milk in the European Union post-quota abolition. But the problem is we are trying to negotiate a butterfat correction coefficient. What that means in practice is that is really the only flexibility that the European Commission has without having to go back through a co-decision process to actually help ease us out of quotas. So they could change a technical measurement tool, which is a butterfat correction measurement. The Commission has the power to do that on its own, and that would essentially give a country like Ireland an extra 2% of milk quota this year, which would help us reduce the super levy fine that a lot of farmers will suffer because everyone's planning for expansion and they're building their herds and so on. And this year we don't get the advantage of the 1% additional quota that we would have got last year and the year before as part of the soft landing policy. There is no 1% additional this year, which is why the butterfat coefficient would be very useful for Irish farmers to try and reduce fines. So I don't want to over talk about the milk, but if you want to ask me questions on that, milk is the big issue for us next week.